going to give you sound advice, useful for the amount of time you have left in your life when you encounter people. Everyone is the hero in their own story, since everyone is the protagonist in their own life. They stand upon their stage, living their life, and sometimes engaging their audience. Now, some people have a need for a greater audience, want to be seen as even more heroic, or want to put on an even more dramatic play. And what does every good story need? Why, a villain, of course. So now you have people who fancy themselves great heroes, who are putting on a show for their audience and are desperate to pull a villain onto their stage in order to be seen as both the martyr and the courageous star. They require this villain to rumble with them, and since they own that stage and control the story, it is far easier to convince their audience of the wrongdoing of their villain. Their audience boos and hisses at this evil person and cheers for the protagonist who will surely defeat their adversary. What happens then when someone tries to pull a villain onto their stage, but that person ignores them, saying, "No, I don't want part in your play. I want no lines. I have my own story to worry about." What happens when the villain ignores the hero's pleas to rumble and refuses to get on the stage? Well, the protagonist is left alone on their stage with what they believe is a captive audience who they must continue to entertain despite the villain's absence. They must now convince others not only of this villain's existence, but that the evil one did in fact harm them greatly. And despite the enemy refusing part in their play, they must convince their audience that there was once a great battle where they were victims and needed to be heroic, defeating their opponent. That hero protagonist is left with nothing to do but monologue. They monologue about their trials and adventures and successes against their nemesis, hoping to be believed. Now, who is the villain? You are. You are the villain. And me. I am the villain. And anyone else who is targeted by such a person or people. You see, toxic people require you to play a vital role in their play in order to be validated by others in regards to their heroicness and your villainy. So what happens to our own play when we simply ignore these actors, refusing to get onto their crooked stage where the audience is turned against us? Nothing. Nothing will happen. Not unless you let it somehow affect your own play and your own audience and your own life. Many times I've had people like this attempt to pull me onto their crooked stage, and I simply refuse to walk up those steps. I blocked them from my life, and I no longer acknowledge their existence. I do not speak to them, I do not speak of them, and I don't think about them. I return to my own stage where I am the protagonist, and I move my plot in the direction I wish to go. I do not let someone else's theater production control what I do in my story. I do not let their monologue affect my character. I do not let them alter my story. I do not seek to entice their audience members to my own play versus theirs. A fake hero might soon notice how flimsy and unbelievable their poorly written monologue is, since their villain decided not to step foot on their stage and give them anything to work with. They might see some of their audience members get up and start to leave. Do you know what they do then? Why, my good fellow, that is when the tall tales begin. You see, when the hero is losing the audience in their one-man show about an epic battle that didn't happen, they need to start making their story more incredible. They need to make their villain 10 feet tall. They need to tell of the awful deeds their invisible villain did and make their enemy's victims look even meeker. In other words, they lie. They lie about everything. They cannot produce proof of the evil one's villainous deeds. So the fake hero must show you how deeply affected they were. So they put on a show of emotions, hoping that you will see their emotional wailing as proof enough. They hope you will think to yourself, "Look at those tears. Surely such a tale they wouldn't lie about." But they do. The tall tales, the lies, and the wailing, they now put on a show of desperation. They rely on the trustworthiness of others not being liars in order to peddle their own lies. Their audience has never encountered someone who would blatantly lie this way, and they find it difficult to believe anyone would, which the protagonist uses to their advantage. The fake hero cannot provide proof of any villainous deeds, since their villain shows to be absent and indeed have nothing at all to do with their show. However, they need their audience to be convinced of the tall tales, so their soliloquy becomes rife with emotional appeals. Do you know what they do next? Audience participation. "You there! I'm sure you must have seen my villain on this stage before the rest of the audience arrived." I did see them," one helpful liar might answer, desperate for the actor's approval. "And you, person in the very back, you have heard tales from other audience members of the awfulness of my villain." I have. I believe your villain once made my uncle's neighbor's friend think poorly of them." "And you, person in the front row, you know of whom I speak." "Why, yes, I had heard of them once, but I see your tears, and I do believe that you are genuine." So then, if all goes according to the false hero's plan, they will have an audience filled with the emotion they had hoped for, emboldened by the other members' participation. And what are you, villain? What are you doing during all this time? Are you sitting quietly amongst the audience, hoping to go undetected? Are you throwing yourself despairingly into the sea of hatred for you, which is filling up before your very eyes? Or are you on your own stage, in your own story, doing something you would rather be doing? Are you living out your great love story with your spouse? What about any of your own dragons you may be fighting in real battles, not imaginary ones? If you are sitting in the false hero's audience, you are not living your own story. If you are drinking your own tears caused by the injustice of people who do not know you or your story, hating you, then you are embracing the punishment heaved upon you by that false hero. For indeed, they are seeking to punish you, if not because their own loathing for you, but because you refuse to participate in their show. You see, when someone wants to make you their villain, there is nothing you can do about it. Their audience will know of you, and they will hate you. But however you respond to them, that's your decision. They cannot set foot on your stage unless you give them permission. Now, the question is, will you pull them upon your stage to be your nemesis? Two things happen if you do. First, you reciprocate their engagement, meaning even if you are pure and just, your villain will still twist your actions and intentions, and you now provide them with proof for their audience of your dastardly deeds, since you gave them any interaction at all that they can twist to fit their own narrative. Secondly, your story becomes about fighting them. You aren't living out your great love story or your own adventures. No, your play becomes about your battle with them. When someone makes you into a villain, you can do nothing but walk away, deprive them of interactions that they can try to use against you, and choose to live your life with joy. You will likely never win over their audience, and that is okay. One day, their audience members might stumble into your theater and see what you're all about after all. If that doesn't happen, know that you didn't need those fans anyway. In fact, you never needed any fans at all. You don't need fans in order to live out your great story. You don't need fans in order to create your happily ever after. In fact, if a fake hero makes you into an unwilling villain in their play, smile. You are, after all, an awful person's ultimate nemesis.